Hello and welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on market data in the cloud. And apologies for the slight delay there. We had a small technical hitch, but we're underway now, which is great. So my name is Mike O'Hara. I'm a contributing editor at A-Team Group, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. And I'm delighted to welcome our expert panel. First of all, we have Luke Sullivan, who's Senior Product Manager, Real-Time Delivery at Refinitiv, an LSEG company. Tim Wheeler, Director, Data Platforms at CME Group. And David Winnig, Head of Market Data and Analytics at Coinbase. So good day, gents. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves in a moment. But first, just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. Now, over the past few years, the topic of market data in the cloud has been hotly debated. Latency has been an issue, which data to put in the cloud has been discussed, and lines have been drawn. But where are we now, and how are the lines getting redrawn? What are the challenges that firms face around market data on the cloud, and how are they addressing those challenges? That's what we'll be talking about, and I expect it to be an interesting discussion. Now, you, the audience, can take part in today's webinar by asking questions of the panel and voting in the polls that we'll be running. To the right of the video window, you'll see a box for questions and polls. We'll be running 3 polls during the webinar, so please do vote. And if you'd like to ask the panelists any questions, we'll aim to address as many of those as possible, time permitting. So please feel free to add your question to the box under the questions tab. So without further ado, let me hand over to our speakers to introduce themselves. So Luke, maybe we can start with you. If you can tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and your interest in market data in the cloud.
Yep, sure. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. So my name's Luke O'Sullivan. I'm one of the product managers at Refinitiv, now part of the London Stock Exchange Group. I'm product manager for real-time feeds. So that covers both our traditional deployed on-premises real-time feed, but also real-time optimized, which is our optimized real-time feed running out of Amazon AWS. So have a keen interest in this topic.
Excellent, thank you. Tim?
Hi everyone, my name's Tim Wheeler. I am responsible for data platforms at CME Group. Mainly, how do we get our data in hands of our customers? This is all-encompassing, so that would be real-time, delayed, and historical. And we have a partnership with Google, as well as some data monetization on AWS as well.
Excellent, thank you. And David?
Hi, good morning. My name is David Winnig. I'm responsible for market data and analytics at Coinbase, which is the combination of both subscribing to all the other crypto exchanges out there, as well as taking our own data and creating a price of an asset for cryptocurrency. In my previous life, I was heading up market data at JP Morgan. So I think I could talk about both the TradFi as well as the crypto world.
Excellent, thank you, David. So before we get into the discussion, let's have our first poll question for the audience. So you should see that appearing on your screens momentarily. And the question is, to what extent has your trading organization migrated market data to the cloud? And you'll see there are 6 optional responses there, ranging from to the greatest extent possible to no extent. So while the audience are voting on that poll, let's start off the discussion. And Luke, if I can start with you, maybe. Perhaps you could set the scene for us in terms of, what are you seeing in terms of how far trading organizations have actually moved either real-time or historical market data to the cloud, and where and why is the line drawn between market data in the cloud and on-premise?
Yeah, so I mean, my perspective is primarily a real-time perspective, and for Refinitiv, what we're seeing in that space is different organizations are on different journeys, right? So we've got a lot of customers with maybe 1 or 2 applications consuming data, and those customers are very happy to move all of that into cloud. Then we've got larger customers with kind of enterprise-wide use case, very complex setups, lots of vendors, lots of sources, lots of internal feeds, and they're on a different journey. They're not ready yet to fully move everything to cloud. but for those use cases, kind of typically what we're seeing is those companies are hiving off certain areas of the business into cloud, or at least starting to take trials of cloud feeds. So our role as market data vendors really is to kind of help in that journey. That's why we're developing feeds from the cloud, our enterprise-wide distribution platform as well. You know, we develop components there which run in cloud, right, to get away from part of the problem we've got with cloud and real time is we've traditionally had a reliance on multicast, right, which isn't particularly good for cloud. So we've reworked some of our software to run in cloud without reliance on multicast. And what we've had to do to help get that move as well is to be able to extend those platforms so it can work either as a standalone module in cloud on its own, just doing its thing, or, you know, connect it up to your on-prem and extend it so it just becomes another element of there. And the last tricky part is connectivity. You know, traditionally, certainly from Refinitiv and going all the way back to Reuters days, right, into last century, you know, very good on fixed lines to client sites. That model is kind of going now, and we're having to look to extend that out to get sort of into cloud connectivity as well, because the idea is what we think customers are going to need is to be able to consume the data wherever they need to consume it and retrieve it from, you know, wherever it's coming from. So that's where, well, not just us, right? I think that's where all vendors are moving to.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. If I can bring you in here as well. I mean, at the CME, what are you seeing in terms of not only, you know, how far you've moved your own market data processes and sourcing and distribution, so on, to the cloud, but also what your customers are up to and where that line is?
Yeah, so I think the line is really being drawn between low latency and non-low latency, right? So trading applications and anything that's not latency sensitive, so say 50 millis or more. For the most part, we see trading organizations moving those non-latency sensitive apps and their historical data to the cloud and keeping their trading applications on-prem. I think this is really for two reasons. One is low latency market data in the cloud is still being figured out, right? We have it currently today where we can deliver data 50 millis within North America, 120 millis to EMEA, and then about 180 to 200 millis over to APAC. And then the other reason really is many of the non-latency sensitive or historical market data apps that our customers are running really don't justify those dedicated capacity and on-prem costs that come with it. Mm-hmm. So the cloud really allows those applications to scale up and down as they're being used.
Interesting. So it's not, the line isn't kind of between real-time and historical market data. It's more a case of how latency sensitive the data is, so it could be
I think I was just in a kind of an internal meeting last week, and we had like low latency. We kind of bucketed everybody as low latency, latency sensitive, and then like end of day or historical, right? So in my opinion, we can deliver latency sensitive and the end of day historical. We're still real-time trading, like, you know, that the big prop shops and banks need. Yeah, that's something that's still being worked out, right?
Yeah. Thank you. And David, what's your experience there?
Well, you know, I'm lucky enough that in the crypto world, almost everything is cloud-based.
Yeah.
So we're kind of born in the cloud. We have our matching engines in the cloud for the most part, and then we're able to distribute on the cloud. And when I need to consume market data from other kind of CeFi or DeFi sources, they're almost all in the cloud. So it makes it quite easily. But I do agree with Tim that, you know, when I was over in TradFi world, what we were trying to do is first move all historical data into the cloud. Right? Once you move historical, then you move analytics and backtesting, right? And then near real time, because, you know, the AI tools, the ML tools are all much better in the cloud and gives you that capability. Your data scientists love it. So you're able to do all kind of near and historical analysis in the cloud.
Mm.
But anything that was kind of real-time, low latency, you still had all your on-prem or colo facilities to deal with that. And since you need to do trading, market data just goes hand in hand with the trading elements.
That's interesting that what you say there about that a lot of these AI and ML and analytics type applications being very much cloud native. So you want to have the data there for those. So while we before we move on to the next question, we've got the poll results up. So if we I don't know if you can see the results of the poll, if we can maybe share those on screen. And the most common response is "we are working on this." I guess there's no surprises there, really, are there, gents? I mean, would you have expected anything else?
I mean, not really. I was just at WIFIC. I was just, I'm on the product side, but we still meet with customers pretty regularly. And I would say in the technology / product management side, cloud is always a center of conversation, especially with, our announcement last year, but it's constantly being talked about. How are we going to leverage it for customers, for ourselves, et cetera.
Yeah.
And to us, it's all about scale right now, right? So being able to allow companies to scale up and down, or allow us internally to do that as well.
Yeah, gotcha. And interestingly, there are no responses where anyone said that they are not doing anything in terms of migrating market data to the cloud. So again, does that echo what you're all seeing, that everybody is at least doing it to some extent?
Yes, definitely. From our perspective, yeah, people are thinking about it. If they're not doing it yet, they're trialing it, and there's plans.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe if I can, thanks for that, to the audience for voting in that poll. David, if I can maybe come on to you. We've talked about where the line is at the moment. Where do you think that trading organizations are aiming to kind of redraw that line between cloud and on-prem? Is it all about the latency aspect, or are there other considerations? And where do you think the data will be coming from? Exclusively from the kind of direct data providers, or more from aggregators and so on?
Okay, so latency does play a big role, but what also plays a role is functional capability. So only recently, last few years, did aggregators make it easy to consume that data within the cloud, whether it's a Refinitiv from Luke or a Bloomberg or what have you. So now they've made the facilities easy to consume. Now it's up to the actual consumers to leverage them when they're applicable for your use case. So that's one. Two is, if you're moving historical data into the cloud, a lot of those historical data providers are now available in the cloud to get that data. Not only to get the raw data or the massaged normalized data, but also there are a lot of vendors in which they're housing that data in the cloud for you. And those providers, whether they're tick store providers, warehouse providers, are now, not, some of them are cloud native, some of them are moving to the cloud, but now they're all available in the cloud for end users to use and leverage.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I know that there's at least one and probably more vendors who are able to offer full level 3 tick data available on the cloud as well, so that firms are able to do all of that, the kind of analysis that you talked about using machine learning and AI and so on those massive stores of data. Tim, what are your thoughts here? Where are you seeing that line being redrawn?
Yeah, so for the aggregators, direct data, that part of the question, I think everybody's moving to the cloud, especially when you start talking to that historical end of day. And I don't really see that changing much. Like the model I see today, where there's you can get it from an aggregator or direct data. I think that really stays the same, and it depends on the customer and the customer's appetite. As for drawing that line in real time and perhaps near real time, a lot of that's still being played out. I alluded to this earlier, but last year we went into a partnership with Google and basically said Globex, our electronic trading platform, will be migrated in real time over it was 10 years then, it's 9 years now because it's been about a year. So for us, our customers are going to have to adapt and get the trading information in the cloud, and there's really no other way around it, because that is our plan, and we're taking our time in doing that, right? It's not something that's going to be delivered tomorrow. We fully acknowledge that it's could be a 10-year endeavor.
And I guess there's a lot of things that need to be worked out and ironed out in that whole process of migrating the whole kind of trading platform across to the cloud. Not least of which is the whole kind of deterministic latency aspect of it, and the multicast that Tim mentioned earlier, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated migration that is going to take the next 9 years to deliver.
So Tim, staying with you then, can you maybe talk us through, not just from the exchange standpoint, but from kind of member firm standpoint, and also be interested to hear from Luke on this from the vendor standpoint. What are the kind of monetary and resource costs of migrating more of this market data to the cloud, and how can those costs be justified?
Yeah, so those costs, really, when I start thinking about monetary costs, the two that we've seen the biggest on are training staff, right? So getting the staff up to speed on Google in our instance right now, and within trading firms or banks or whatever, a lot of times those banks are cloud agnostic. So they might have one desk or one section of the bank that's using Google and the other section of the bank that's using AWS. And then you have technologists that sit in between. So it's getting that staff really leveled up on both, right? And, there's Azure out there and there's others as well. So training is number one. And then I think number two is really running in parallel, right? So as you migrate, you're going to have your on-prem solution as well as your cloud solution. And a lot of times there's going to be that, you just need that redundancy for a while until you prove out the cloud. Internally and externally, both people justify this by being able, kind of what I was talking about earlier, scale up and down quicker. So if you really have an idea and you want to be able to test it out, where in the past you'd have to order servers. Once you order those servers, they have to be shipped. Once they're shipped, they have to be set up. And then, okay, we've waited 3 or 4 months, right? Now we can start our project. Where with the cloud, you really just you can spin up instances and start almost working on those ideas instantaneously. So this gives you faster time to market, right? Or even if it's not direct to market, you can get in front of customers, or internal or external, get feedback, see if there's something there. And if there's not, you can ditch it. And if there is, you can move forward. And, it's really back to scaling and moving faster, in my opinion. And then one last thing I want to really touch on there is back to where you purchase servers, right? The old way of doing things, or kind of the old way of doing things, it's still in flux, is if you look through from the pandemic till recent, getting servers and getting hardware has been a long pool, where before that it wasn't. So the cloud became even more advantageous for firms throughout the past 2 years or so. Yeah.
And Luke, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, would you echo what Tim is saying there, or do you see other kind of monetary and resource costs and different ways to justify those?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much echoing, not quite word for word, but what Tim was saying there. I think he's sort of pretty much nailed it. Any migration work is efforts, right, as well as the training, right? There's effort on people's time to plan any migration and execute it as well. And then you've got not just the infrastructure dual running, right? Your support dual running as well. So what do? You're not going to get more people, right, much as you'd love to. So it's really, it is tough. I think anything we're doing, certainly in the real-time space, probably is some degree what our customers will be doing as well, right? When they migrate to cloud, effectively what we run is a huge version of our own platform. So customers will go through the same the same thing. And the important bit is going to be to plan that migration carefully enough so that it's risk-free, but quickly enough so that you minimize those dual running costs.
Yeah,
but the question about the benefits of it, right, are the benefits are real, right? So what we've seen is the refresh even of keeping a on-prem kind of distribution platform running and stuff. As you said, you've got to get new servers, you've got to get you've got to develop new versions of software and test it, and you're running data centers with cabinets and all that sort of stuff. And what we're seeing using sort of green blue deployment methods in cloud is to get from the sort of start of a development cycle through QA up into deployment is much quicker, and the it's a much better use of people's time, and it's less costly.
Yeah, sure. We're going to have another poll in a sec. I mean, David, do you have any thoughts on that topic before we run into the poll?
Well, I mean, the only thing to add on is that the costs of the cloud. Luke and Tim mentioned all the benefits of it, but there are also some detriments that you have to be aware of. So without multicast support, if you try to do the poor man's multicast, then costs will skyrocket pretty quickly on bandwidth usage. So you have to be careful, right? And I assume Tim's 9-year leadway has some assumptions with multicast support and otherwise in the cloud. Yeah. Otherwise, it may not be economical.
Gotcha. Okay, so we have another poll for the audience now, and it's all about challenges. So what are the challenges of migrating market data to the cloud at your organization? And 6 potential answers there. Legacy technology systems, too many sources of market data, achieving required latency, lack of management buy-in or budget, shortfall in required skills, or no challenges. So again, while the audience is voting on that, I'll come back to you, Dave, and ask you, what do you see as the main challenges of migrating more market data to the cloud? I mean, I guess it's not something that you've had to done in your role at Coinbase, because like you said earlier, everything's cloud native, but you haven't always been at Coinbase, and I'm sure you're aware of some of the challenges in the TradFi space. I mean, what do you see as the challenges and how can they be addressed?
Well, first I'll start with a crypto challenge, right? So not everyone, you have multi-cloud solutions. So I'll go back to Tim. Tim's in Google Cloud, I'm in AWS. So that's been a bit of a pain to subscribe to CME data and get it in, right? So when you're in a multi-cloud solution, there aren't great paved roads to make it really, really easy on the developer. Right? Now, it's not overly complicated, but it adds to the complication. So that's one. From a TradFi world, look, the reality is, as long as matching engines are sitting in on-prem, you have to have an on-prem presence, right? The more the matching engines, and I welcome Tim moving over to cloud, the more they move over, then all the consumers move over. Right? Otherwise, we're going to be stuck with historical and non-latency applications.
Yeah, and interesting because we've talked so far about matching engines, market data, and all this kind of moving towards the cloud. I think in the crypto space, you're actually seeing some moves in the other direction as well. If I'm not wrong, in a couple of crypto exchanges now looking to have dedicated co-located matching engines to run in a similar way to some of the more traditional exchanges. Is that a backward step? Is it something that they need to do? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So it's unfortunately how you compete in this space. So if you're the big boy on the block, then you can say I'm in the cloud. Everybody has to be in the cloud because I'm the big boy, right? If you're trying to compete with others, then one of the competitive edges is to be lower latency and to be more, your latency is more consistent.
Deterministic, yeah.
Deterministic, thank you. And so if you have more deterministic latency, then the market makers like that ability more. Now, my preference is let's get the cloud to be more deterministic rather than go back to on-prem, because there's a tremendous amount of benefits being in the cloud.
Yeah. And Tim, I'd welcome your thoughts on that as well, because that must be one of the challenges that you guys are facing is how are we going to make all of this as we move stuff to the cloud, deterministic and similar performance to what our members see now.
Yeah, I mean, really, we've spent a year outlining this, and we're still in the investigation phase, deciding what's the best path forward. How do we develop best practices? And there's not much more I can share than that right now. I do have a question for David, though. David, maybe you know, maybe you don't, but with these on-prem solutions, is there like order entry in the cloud still? Right. So I don't know what I'm not familiar with what DeFi or crypto firms, sorry, I'll call it crypto firms or crypto exchanges are moving on-prem. I must have missed that news release or something, but out of curiosity, I'm just like, is there cloud talking to on-prem, right? With like an order entry API or something?
Yeah. So if you look at it from a matching engine perspective, from the exchange perspective, right? We all run order entry or fixed gateways, right, as an entry point. Now you could run them in the cloud, and we do for Coinbase Exchange, right? Now the other side can be in the cloud, your client, or it could be on-prem, right? It's just a matter of the latency. The latency isn't that much different, to be honest with you, if the matching engine is in the cloud.
Right.
So, but there are a couple, we run our derivatives exchange on-prem. So, there are a few situations where you want to make that accessible. And when you do, it's a combination of sometimes you run the matching engine in the cloud, but you put a fixed adapter on-prem, or you run the whole thing on-prem. It's kind of mix and match, and certain exchanges do it slightly differently.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have our poll results in for this second poll, and if Nicole, if we could possibly share those on the screen. The most common challenge of migrating market data to the cloud is achieving required latency. Again, probably not a surprise there. I mean, Luke, David, Tim, any thoughts on these results? Is it what you would expect?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'll hop in here, but I think, it depends what hat you're wearing. So achieving required latency, obviously, if you're a trading shop, that is something. But what we've seen internally, right, is really information security. So kind of back to that training point. How do we get our global information security team okay with the security practices in the cloud compared to what we've done on-prem? Data or corporate governance is another one. So if you, in my opinion, if you do stuff right, you should only be able, in the cloud, you should have one copy of data, and that should all be managed off entitlements. Yep. There is a lot of moving parts in organizations, and you got to make sure that stuff isn't duplicated unless it's completely needed. And then third is really the entitlements piece, right? So cloud entitlements, in my opinion, haven't caught up with what we need as an exchange. So when commercializing, at least internally, we can figure that out. But when commercializing our data platforms and products, there's still a gap there. I don't think that can't be solved. And, once that is solved, that just is going to help not only us as an exchange, but Luke and David and all other customers of ours to scale and just work quicker within the cloud and not have to worry about that on-prem use case again, right?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about these results is if we'd have run this poll maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I think that lack of management buy-in and budget would have probably been a lot higher up in the results. But it seems now that management buy-in and budget is there in a way that it maybe wasn't in the past. Would you agree with that, Luke?
Yeah, I do. One thing we're starting to see as well is is more, it's maybe a different kind of problem coming from that management buy-in and budget as well. They're thinking about it more. Suddenly they're worried about, what's our exposure? Are we putting all of our eggs in one basket? So they're some companies are starting to think, right, if I'm entirely with one cloud service provider, what happens, right? What happens if there's some sort of problem? And thinking, oh, right, if my vendors have put all of their eggs in one basket as well, what happens there? So I think as that management buy-in sort of gets higher, I think those type of questions are going to come up more and more. And as a vendor, we're going to have an answer for it, and I guess exchanges as well are going to have to we're going to go back to exchanges and ask exactly the same questions, right? For all of our sources of data, well, how, what's the risk, right? What's the risk of losing stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an age-old question, right? When we're doing traditional sort of on-prem stuff, it's, what happens if this building blows up? What happens if that building blows up? What happens if an entire city blows up, or you lose an entire continent, and, et cetera, et cetera. You get to a certain stage where, crikey, if all of that's happened, we've got bigger problems.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, Luke, I mean, staying with you as a vendor, what are some of the kind of technologies and solutions and services that might help firms kind of migrate their market data operations and facilities and so on to the cloud?
Yeah, so for us, the private link parts help massively with sort of secure cross connection and the distribution, right? And I think to help customers as well, I think we've all kind of touched on it at various points. With different vendors and different customers and different data providers are all going to be in different cloud instances, and we need to be able to join those up in a sort of quick way, right? And that's going to absolutely help everybody. I think so. So it almost, everything becomes kind of cloud agnostic, right? It doesn't matter where you are, as long as you can get the data in the format you need it and the way you need it, and the latency you need it in. That should be fine. The elasticity helps, right? Scaling up and down. Cost savings we see from that are great. Customers will see that as well, and it starts making you think differently about how you're going to do, how you can do everything. So it's really good for us. And then we have the regional failover we get from VPC peering, those type of things. That massively helps us with authentication and service discovery of our services. Can do it on-prem. It's not impossible, but it's nowhere near as easy as moving to cloud. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And David, anything excuse me, you have to add there in terms of like technologies, solutions? I mean, you guys are cloud native. What are some of the interesting technologies that you're seeing?
Well, some of the things that help is when you kind of remove the obstacles in communicating between cloud and colo. Right? You make it really, really easy, really simple, such that it's almost an extension of your data center, almost an extension of your colocation, right? Some vendors have been moving in that direction. Equinix helps quite a bit in that, but there's some ways to go there. The second thing, just to build upon what Luke said, is if you're using vendors, whether it is for aggregation of data, real-time data, or storage of your data, as they become multi-cloud capable and hide that complexity from you, right? So if you want to store your market data for historical purposes, it needs to be across multiple cloud providers. But I don't want to know the complexity of that. You handle it for me as a TIC provider, if you will. So as that becomes more mature, that will pave the road to more usage.
Yeah, and interestingly, we have an audience question, which I'd like to bring up now, actually. I mean, typically we save the questions till the end, but I think this is relevant because we're talking about multi-cloud. And the question, which has been voted up quite a lot, is what would the panel advise in a multi-cloud environment in terms of moving market data to cloud efficiently and effectively? So I guess continuing on the theme that you're just speaking about there, David, I mean, what are some of the kind of best practices in terms of moving into this multi-cloud environment?
So, in my past, we've picked vendors that allowed us where the vendor operates the exact same service, whether you're in Google or Amazon, exact same interface, exact same API. And we usually don't pay for, multiple cloud at that point. But if we wanted to move from one cloud provider to another, it would be almost completely seamless to us. And if you find a vendor that does that, that's a huge value add that per vendor can provide. Yeah. Because a lot of your systems, unfortunately, you're going to be tied into one cloud provider or another for a lot of them. But anyone that you can just kind of, have that flexibility, that's a nice value add.
So I guess firms should be looking to work with technology partners who are kind of cloud agnostic, ideally. Yeah. Tim,
yes, and provide that cloud agnostic to you.
Yes.
In terms of their APIs and their capabilities.
Yeah. I mean, Tim, you mentioned earlier that obviously CME are doing a lot with Google, but you guys also use AWS, and it's what are your thoughts on the multi-cloud challenges?
Yeah, so I mean, cloud agnostic is what everybody's talking about right now, right? With the news over the past year of certain vendors going to Google, certain vendors going to Amazon, and how does that really work? Currently, we do have a footprint in Amazon for our historical market data. So customers, we have a product called DataMine that customers can come access a variety of data sets from. And that we have API, SFTP, S3 transfer, as well as a couple other delivery mechanisms where the customer, it doesn't matter where they are, they can write to that API, kind of back to David's point. They can be in Google, they can be in S3, they can be in Azure, etc. They write to that API and it scales out. It doesn't matter where you are. We don't care what cloud provider you're in. And I think that's a trend that you can plan to see us continue to develop. Now, whether we sit in Google or Amazon, that shouldn't matter to David or Luke, right? As long as they get the data in a streamlined fashion. And if they want to move, to David's point, if they want to move, there's no headache for them to move to a different cloud provider.
Yeah. So Tim, sticking with you, and I'd be interested to get Luke's insight on this one as well. I mean, how do you see the role of exchanges and market data vendors evolving in as things move more to the cloud? What will they play a different role?
Yeah, so my answer is going to be super boring. And that is, I don't think it changes. Once again, I think this goes back to the customer, right? If I go order a pair of shoes from Nike, I can also go to Zappos or another redistributor of their shoes and get those exact same shoes, right? Maybe Nike has a custom pair that I can't get anywhere else. And I think you're just going to see flavors of that throughout the landscape. At CME, I kind of just touched upon this, but we're really just looking to leverage current and future cloud technologies to deliver the best data, products, and platforms we can to our customer base, and in the cadence they want: historical, end of day, delayed, real time, etc. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to find the best and create the best data services we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. And Luke, what are your thoughts on that as a market data vendor?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a very high level, as Tim said, the roles remain the same, right? I guess the question is what challenges have we got to sort of move more and more into cloud and keep delivering over time? And the problems, I guess, the challenges we've got to overcome are the same ones we've been discussing, right? People are going to move at different rates, right, at different speeds of moving into cloud, and they're going to be in different cloud providers as well. So that whole thing of into cloud connectivity becomes important. That's kind of technical challenge, one of a technical challenge, right? You could probably talk for hours on what they'd all be. Another side we've got, which I think Tim kind of touched upon earlier as well is around what we see from our side as a kind of rights management and entitlements part as well. So cloud distribution offers more flexibility to customers, right? They can take it on-prem, they can consume it in cloud, but what we're seeing across our data providers as well, sort of different speeds in sort of adopting the principle of that. So there are quite a few exchanges who looking at things like obviously billing on things like site licenses and stuff with a premise of fixed premises and fixed circuits and this sort of thing. But so a customer consuming data moving to cloud can cause kind of entitlement problems as well, and I think that's a challenge I think the industry generally has to overcome to help move forward on that.
Yeah. So Luke, I mean, I think you am I right in thinking that you have a kind of case study that you can share with us of an effective migration where that line now sits between cloud and on-prem data?
Yeah, so I mean, a good example would be we've got a customer who provides sort of online broker services, right, to their own customers. So that includes kind of order management, execution, and stuff, as well as price discovery, which is our sort of real-time area. So be moving their data ingestion into cloud as well as some of their other operations as well. So what we found is with the sort of real-time connector stuff that we've been working on, which is the cloud version of our market data platform, we're able to kind of extend that platform. So we've not got one running on-prem and another one running in cloud. You can kind of extend the platform, start testing the cloud parts. Is it working? Is it doing what you want? Has it got the latency you need? And those type of things, and then kind of helps them move more and more of their services at a good rate. So that's kind of, I guess, how I'd expect things to move generally. I think about the line being redrawn, I'm not sure if it's redrawn as becoming more blurred, should we say, where the line is, in as much as it's not so much either on premises or in cloud. It's kind of how much of it is in which environment. But as long as vendors and customers can extend that as needed, it's pretty effective and very useful. So ultimately, I guess we'll get the 10-year plan, right? And Tim's talked about and stuff. Probably be looking at way more stuff sitting in cloud there. Yeah.
We've got our final poll coming up, but Tim or David, I mean, any kind of use cases or case studies that either of you feel at liberty to share? Or
yeah, I'll discuss one. So we have an index provider who is connecting to our near real-time data, so 50 millisecond delayed via Google PubSub. So we publish our data and they subscribe to that data. They then consume that data and push it through a Google application called Dataflow. Think of that. There's a lot. Dataflow is very nuanced, but think of it as a derived data calculator, right? Almost, right? So they're performing their index calculations as in the cloud, and then they are pushing those to their customer, how their customers want them. That's anything from email to a post at 2 o'clock. I think it's 2 o'clock Eastern time, so their asset managers can recalibrate their portfolios, right? Yeah. This customer is Google native. So they're used to all that. They're also doing certain use cases where they're grabbing that data from on-prem and from other exchanges, pushing it to Google, doing that in Dataflow, and then pushing it back out to the customer. So we stream that. That's just an example of how we streamline the workflow for them, right?
Excellent. Thank you. That's really interesting. So if we can have the next poll up, please, Nicole. The question is, to what extent does your organization gain or expect to gain operational and business benefits from moving more market data to the cloud. Significant operational benefits, some operational benefits, significant business benefits, some business benefits, or no benefits. So that's an interesting one, I guess. Where does the line actually sit between operational benefits and business benefits? But I guess we'll see what the audience comes up with on this one. While the audience are answering that, I'd quite like to you guys to address one of the audience questions, because we've got another one that's been kind of voted up to the top of the list, and that's: what innovations, new services, or new functionality would you like to see from the cloud providers in order to support market data in the cloud? I don't know which of you would like to take that one. How about you, Tim? Because you're working closely with Google over the next 10 years. So.
Sure. I'll give this one a stab. So I think two things. First, cloud agnostic. So anybody can scale out to different clouds, right? I really think that's, outside of entitlements, that's probably the most important place that we need to get to. And then second is leveraging the technologies they have internally. So think machine learning, AI, et cetera, that very, very skilled practitioners today need to use. How can we or they scale that out so the average Joe, or maybe somebody that's just a database administrator or something like that,
so kind of no code
the average data scientist, how can they use that? So I think those are two good use cases that would really help adoption and scalability.
Yeah, and Luke, I think you were going to pitch in on that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, in the real-time space, certainly, as David said earlier as well, certainly sort of multicast or multi-class replacement, right, is going to be essential if you want to start getting down to low latency, ultra low latency delivery of data. Would be a massive benefit.
Yeah, I echo that as well, Luke. That should have been my third point.
Okay. So we're getting some results in on the poll about benefits, and interestingly, if we can bring those poll results up, please, Nicole. It's the operational benefits that seem to be more expected than the business benefits. Does that tie in with what you would expect, David?
So if you're running a static organization, so same type of flow every single day, then there is a perception that cloud is going to be cheaper, and reality is it's really not. Right? So you can grow faster, you can shrink faster, but if you are pretty constant in your usage of infrastructure and you've optimized your colo environment, then it's really not going to be significantly cheaper, right? But operationally, there's huge benefits. So you lose a hard drive, you lose a server, you lose a router. Those things you don't have to worry about in a cloud environment. And they took up a significant amount of my team's time before, just managing the physical infrastructure.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, business benefits, it's not just about cost, right? I mean, I would have thought that, if you really leverage the cloud, then, you're leveraging the whole innovation, all of the things that sit cloud native, like some of the AI and ML type engines that are on there. I mean, there's a lot that you can do from a business perspective if you're on the cloud versus pure operationally. This one's a little bit of a surprise to me, but I guess, from what you said there, David, there are some, significant operational benefits as well. So, okay. So staying with you then, David, I mean, what would you talked about some of the operational benefits there. What do you see as some of the more business benefits then, outside of cost of, moving market data to the cloud?
So, we all know all the benefits of being in the cloud.
Yeah.
I won't repeat those. There is one benefit that is not as obvious to you as you might think. So for the most part, if you have a matching engine and you need to get to it, so you're a trading organization, you need to get to the matching engine. Typically, it's on you to do that.
Mm.
You have to find a way, contracting with a number of different carriers or network providers in order to get you from where you are today to the matching engine.
Yeah.
Well, when you're in the cloud, it's a little opposite. Once you get your server in the cloud gets you to the destination, right? And that might sound, oh, that's not that complicated, but it's actually makes your life so much simpler, assuming you're not in the low latency space and low latency. So that's a benefit that's not as obvious, but has a huge benefit, both cost-wise as well as operational-wise.
Yeah, yeah. There's another audience question that I'd quite like to put to you guys, and it's that we've mentioned the risk of having all your eggs in one basket with a single cloud provider, but with the vast majority of cloud concentrated in 3 hyperscalers, and I'm assuming that's that kind of Microsoft, AWS, and Google. Do you see a concentration risk, and how should that be addressed? Luke, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so in Refinitiv and LSEG, we're using different cloud providers as well. So we're using AWS for real time, but for tick and stuff with Google. But it is, it is a concern that there's only a few players in there, and the reliability of those players is key and critical, right? Yeah. So what we're using, I guess, and what the challenge we're looking to overcome is around kind of using redundancy across regions and senders and availability zones to make sure that if you're throwing all your eggs in one basket, you've got a big enough basket, right? It's it is a challenge to overcome that. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, are you worried about concentration risk?
I mean, I think as an organization, we looked at concentration risk when we made this decision, and we decided to go with Google. Part of the reason being their global backbone, right? So we do know there is a lot of PO pops over the Google network, and that is something that we felt comfortable with. Outside of that, I don't think I could have summed it up better than Luke saying, we ultimately it's a challenge for everybody, and you would like for it to be more diverse, but it's kind of the world we live in right now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we're kind of drawing to a close now, getting to the top of the hour. So I'd like to maybe ask each of you ideally what 3 pieces of advice you would give to practitioners working on migrating market data to the cloud. But I mean, don't feel like you have to come up with 3. I mean, if you've got 1 main piece of advice, that's fine. But what are the kind of key pieces of advice that you'd give to firms when migrating? And I'll start with you, David.
So, coming from a pure colo environment that I managed for many years, switching to the cloud, one of the things that has been kind of painful is sometimes things just happen underneath the covers and you don't know what's going on, right? And so in the colo world, you have visibility all the way down to the NIC, down to hardware level. You have full transparency, and you can investigate a problem from begin to end. In the cloud, unfortunately, there's a layer that you just don't have that type of transparency. So it's not unusual that something fails, it comes right back up in a second later, and everything's working a second later, and you're like, well, what happened?
Yeah, you got no idea what went on.
You're going into a dark hole that you'll never come out of. So that's one of the things. Your systems need to be resilient and need to just be capable of handling those blips that occur, especially if you run 24/7 like we do.
Yeah. Tim?
Yeah, so I think I'll give you 3, Mike. So
Hey.
and a lot of this is from a product/business perspective and less from the technical side, right? So the first I think is patience, right? A cloud migration doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a while to see the benefits. It really does. It can take a while. The second is you need to be pragmatic. Really think through what you're migrating first. We've seen some firms that we've worked with, they know a version of an application is coming end of life. So that's the first application they're moving to the cloud. If it's, back to my earlier use cases, not low latency, so more latency sensitive, or end of day, those are the first ones they move. And David talked on that as well. And then third is the cost is probably going to hurt right away, right? Back to that on-prem cloud dual world, the cost is probably going to hurt right away, but you need to incur that cost to be able to really think about scale and moving your operations and your business to be able to move more elastic.
Excellent, thank you. And last word to you, Luke.
Well, I mean, so I think know your costs and where you think you want to, or where you want to make your savings, and kind of from a service point of view as well, sort of understand where you're looking for the service improvements, right? So, is a move to cloud really going to help with that or not? And very important one, certainly as a market data vendor, right, is understand your downstream apps, right? What's connecting, what are the users doing, and what might they need to change? So we have customers running pretty old APIs and applications and stuff that we just don't support from our clouds. We've had to write some code to do that kind of conversion before it hits us. So make sure you understand those. So you don't want to shift everything to cloud and then find out you've got a desk of users with some 20-year-old application that suddenly stops working.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. Well, fortunately, we've come to the end of this. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, there's a whole bunch of audience questions that unfortunately we didn't get to, so I can only apologise to the audience for that. We have limited time, but gentlemen, thank you very much for a really interesting and informative discussion. And special thank you to Refinitiv and LSEG Company for sponsoring today's webinar. So before we close, just to let you know that this webinar will be available online for you to watch at your leisure, along with all the other 18 webinars that are up there. We have some interesting webinars coming up in the new year, details of which you can find on our website, along with details of our upcoming events, including the London Trading Tech Summit in February. And finally, a quick reminder to please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear people's views to help improve our products and our services. So that's it for today. A big thanks again to Luke, Tim and David, and thank you to all of you who have taken part in today's webinar. Thank you all.